The day I entered Chernobyl felt like a nightmare before I'd even set foot inside the Exclusion Zone. My name is Alexei, and I work for the Soviet government. When Reactor 4 blew up, orders came down to contain it, to assess the damage. They didn't give us much information. They told us there'd been a small explosion, just a little problem with the reactor, a routine issue. But when I arrived, I knew. I knew this wasn't routine, this was a horror story. April 29th, 1986, Chernobyl Exclusion Zone. The plant loomed against the gray sky, a skeletal structure that had seen hell and barely survived. The air tasted strange even through my respirator, dry and metallic, but I chalked it up to nerves. I'd never seen anything like this. The ground was a patchwork of ash and charred earth, as though someone had set fire to reality itself. "Stay close, Anton," one of my comrades muttered through the crackling comms. His voice was a comfort, though he sounded shaken too. Our Geiger counters ticked wildly, almost screaming as we approached the core. I felt the vibrations of the ticking deep in my chest, matching my heartbeat. But it wasn't just the radiation. It was something else. It was as if we'd crossed an invisible line, stepping into a place that didn't belong in this world. Inside the reactor building, the concrete walls were darkened, scorched from the blast, and the floors were littered with fragments of metal, glass, and debris I couldn't identify. The silence was suffocating. No one spoke. No one dared to. Then I heard it. At first, it sounded like a whisper, a faint hiss that I thought was a leak in my suit. But as I strained to listen, I realized it was coming from deeper within the reactor building. "Did you hear that?" I asked, but only static greeted me. Anton and the others were frozen, staring down a long corridor that seemed to stretch on forever, disappearing into darkness. The whisper grew louder, turning into an almost human moan. It sounded like something, was in pain. "Alexei," Anton's voice wavered. I think someone's in there." The rational part of me screamed that it was impossible. There couldn't be anyone left. Anyone close to the core when it exploded would have been vaporized instantly. But the sound persisted, growing more frantic, as if calling for us. I don't know what possessed me to keep going. Perhaps it was duty. Perhaps it was madness. Or maybe it was just the feeling that I had no choice, that I was being pulled forward. Into the core. As we moved deeper, the temperature climbed, though it wasn't just heat. The air itself felt charged, buzzing like a million wasps. The shadows seemed to twist, writhing in the corners of my vision. Then, finally, we reached the heart of the devastation. Reactor 4. It was open, cracked like an egg, its contents spewed across the floor. The reactor core was a molten, smoldering pit, glowing faintly with an unnatural, almost sickly light. And around it, shapes moved. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks. But no, they were there, ghostly, half-formed figures shifting in and out of sight. I could see the faint outlines of people, workers still in their uniforms, faces distorted in expressions of agony and despair. They flickered like static on a television, and with each flicker, they edged closer to us. Then I heard it again, that faint whisper, louder now, almost deafening. It was a chorus of voices overlapping, calling out in broken, garbled Russian, "Help! Help us!" I stumbled back, bile rising in my throat. My hand instinctively went to my suit as if tightening it could protect me from whatever this was. But I was too late. I felt the wetness before I saw it. The leak. My fingers came away from my suit, covered in a thick, warm liquid. Panic gripped me as I realized what was happening. My suit had torn, a small puncture, barely noticeable, but enough to let the invisible poison of this place seep in. "Anton." My voice quivered, barely a whisper. But when I turned to look for him, he was gone. My other comrades were gone too. The world blurred. The walls seemed to close in, twisting, changing. I could hear them, those voices, now shrieking, demanding, accusing. "Why did you let us die?" The faces swam in front of me, growing clearer. Eyes stared out of melted sockets, mouths twisted into screams that I could still hear. My skin began to itch, then burn. I felt it, the radiation seeping into my bones, turning my blood to fire. I was becoming part of the reactor, part of this nightmare, just like them. As my vision dimmed, I realized the truth. Chernobyl was no longer just a place. It was alive, feeding on those who entered, trapping them, turning them into something beyond death. And now, I was one of them. I tried to scream, but no sound came out.